Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we're talking about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Doctor Who, as well as the latest episode of Charmed. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I'll accrue the time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I had to say about this week's episode of Doctor Who, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Charmed. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Doctor Who, a crazy and great episode. Very interesting. Obviously, the team finds themselves in Norway, present day, and it's interesting to come across a sheep and Doctor's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay, it's just a regular old sheep, and it's like apparently in like 193 years from now, like the sheep and humans do not get along because like the sheep kind of want different treatment between them and humans, and it turns into a whole bloody mess. Because I even love at the end of the episode, the Doctor's like, oh, no sheep around, probably off somewhere plotting. And it's like, dude, it seems like such a big deal for you to just randomly drop like that. So that's interesting. But they go to this house where they find this girl, Hannah, who's in this place, is boarded up. Turns out she's blind, and her dad's going missing. And I thought it was such an interesting element in the episode is the fact is her and Ryan don't get along. She gets super pissed at Ryan because he said there's a chance her dad might have just ran away, like that she's making up this whole monster thing to kind of cope with it. And then Yasmin is like, Ryan, he's like, well, I'm just saying. They kind of get pissed at him for it, but it's like it never comes up. But I'm sure that's Ryan coming at that situation from his biased opinion about dads, because he doesn't have the greatest situation with his own dad. So I think he kind of looks at a lot of dad. Not always, because there was that episode a little while back about, the ship hospital where it's like, oh, you're going to be a great dad. But it's just like, I think a dad under those circumstances, I think he just put two and two together. He just assumed, which to a certain degree, he wasn't completely wrong. Because later on, we end up finding out that the whole thing was orchestrated. Because I was like, wait, is there some deeper thing behind this? Like, is she, like, actually a bad guy or something? We just don't know it. Because, like, it turns out the monster sound, because it's like, oh, there's a thing out in the woods her dad wondered about. He set all this up, and then he disappeared. It's like, then they're growling at a specific point in time. It's like, oh, it's the same time every day? Yeah, it's when it hunts. And it's like, they made such a point, because even the Doctor's like, the same time every day? And it's like, dude, that's such a, like, little details when you look and think back, you're like, oh. So the reason why it goes off at the same point every day is because her dad put up a speaker and stuff like that. And it's like, why is that? Nevertheless, Ryan kind of got stuck, looking after her. And he has to lie because the Doctor written on the wall, like, assumed that her dad might be dead and just kind of, like, look after her and all that. And she kind of figures it out pretty quickly, like there was something that the Doctor wrote. It wasn't like a map or anything like that. It was something she wrote, but Ryan wouldn't tell her. And so I think partially because of what Ryan said, plus she wanted to track down her dad, she ended up knocking him out with the door, so that was pretty brutal. That, her knocking him out kind of made me go at first, it's like, is that her just trying to find her dad, or is there because there's something deeper going on here? But then like Graham, Yasmin, and the Doctor go into the mirror, which isn't actually a mirror, it's actually a portal to another dimension, which I thought was pretty sick, because I liked the first introduction of it, because the moment that sound went off, I was like, is that supposed to mean like all the sound disappeared? I thought I was like, is that what we're dealing with? But then like Graham got scared by Ryan talking, I was like, oh, okay, so it's not like that at all, but it's like the reflection was gone, and then it came back, and the Doctor froze it in the moment that the reflections would be gone, just to kind of get the portal open. I thought that was pretty neat. And what we end up finding is Ribbons, which it's kind of sad things played out like that, but at the same time, it's like Ribbons was kind of a douchebag. He wanted to trade, and like the Doctor said, a second knife. Of course he has his second knife. It's also like, are we really going to trust a guy that has a whole bunch of rats on his belt? Wasn't it like rats with like 6 legs or something like that? And he wanted to trade for the Doctor's Sonic, which is like, because even she was kind of like, have I talked about how much I love my Sonic? It's like, I feel like it's gotten a lot more play than a lot of Sonics in the past. Maybe that's just my imagination. I don't know, I feel like she's used it way more. I don't know, like I said, that's most likely me being stupid. The Doctor's always used their, Sonics in the past, but it seems like this one is just a lot more at play. I don't know. To be fair, I could be, I could be completely wrong about that. That's just where my mind is at the time, but I'm sure I'm completely wrong. I'm sure if you go back and tally it up, you're like, oh, Michael, you're a complete idiot. The Doctor used it this many times in the past, which is way more than it's been used even thus far in the season. Something like that, so nevertheless. Well, season series, obviously it's interchangeable. But nevertheless, but poor Ribbons got, I mean, like I said, once again, he's a douchebag. He held Graham at like knife point, and Graham was like, how can you smell worse than you did before? I just feel that even with a knife at your throat, that's still going through your mind. I guess if he stinks bad enough, it's like, that's all that matters. And there's also those moths that eat flesh. It's like, are they specific to that place, which we later on find out is an anti-zone, which is interesting. Basically, it's a zone, a buffer zone that the universe creates when there's something that's putting time and space in threat. So it creates like this little bubble that kind of separates our universe from the trouble. And I'm like, that's such an interesting thing. And the fact is that he was born here meant that, and that kind of plays into, because he's like, I don't know, this is where I've always been. It's like, oh man, because, and it's kind of sad because that buffer zone has been there since probably like the beginning of time, essentially. Because we end up finding out this has something to do with this thing called Solitrax, which that whole breakdown was such a fascinating thing. Basically, it's this energy that is incompatible with our existence, because basically since the very beginning, before time and all that, there was light, mass, and matter and all that, but it couldn't come together because Solitrack energy was here. And so for the universe to be able to fully embrace itself, kind of do its own thing, kind of flex a little and come together, it's like, no, I need my independence. I don't need you around. Obviously, that's not necessarily the case, but that's kind of another way of looking at it. So like pushes the Solitrack into its own pocket dimension, which is so interesting. There's that mirrored world and everything. I was like, whoa, is this supposed to be like an alternate reality? It's like, oh, Hannah's mom, Trina, is still alive and everything, which even I had to call Eric out for being a dick. He's like, oh, no, there's plenty of food. Like, her dad had been gone for a little while, but he's like, no, I'll come back. It's like, that's still a dick thing to do. Like, I get it, you miss your wife and everything, but the fact of the matter is your daughter is there. She needs you. The fact is you're putting your own needs above hers. How I know that? It's because you came here by yourself. At no point in time did you even think, maybe I'll bring my daughter along. The fact is you were so focused on your own sadness. It's not, oh, I guess it's not like my daughter misses her mom or anything. So that kind of shows you kind of like the selfishness of it. But at the same time, you get it, because it's like, even Hannah had said it herself. Like, the reason why they moved away is just because her dad couldn't handle the situation of, it's like losing his wife, Hannah's mom, Trina. It was so hard for him. He just didn't want probably to be around any reminders of it. So that's why they kind of got away somewhere so secluded. But, I actually completely forgot to talk about the fact is, in the end, with Ribbons getting eaten by the flesh moths, because he was so, kind of goes along with Eric, just because he was kind of selfish, because he wanted what he wanted. He saw the Sonic on the floor and he tried to reach for it and he got eaten for it. Clearly picked the flesh off his bones, that's why I'm like, that's kind of scary that anti-zone is like that. But to be fair, I guess that's by design, because the place is meant to make it so that you don't cross over to this other dimension. So, but nevertheless, what that made me think of immediately when that came up, I was like, wait, like Coraline is what I immediately thought of as like, oh, this is an alternate reality where she's just like it's got to be like Coraline, which I think if it wasn't for the fact is my niece recently watched that movie, which that is a great movie. I caught bits and pieces of it. I haven't sat down and watched it for like in a very long time, but my niece was recently watching it, so it was kind of in my brain at the time. I was like, all right, yeah. And it's like, it was kind of an interesting thing of like, oh yeah, these aren't really the people that you love. They're just kind of fake copies meant to keep you here because this place is a trap. I'm like, that's so fascinating. Because, and it's also another nerdy comparison I'm going to make. The Solitrack kind of reminds me of the Speed Force. It's this entity that is its own, like a consciousness all on its own. And it's like its own universe, which is kind of what the Speed Force is. Like, if you know The Flash at all, which I only know The Flash because of the TV show, but even that basis of it is still kind of interesting, because as you can see, like, the Speed Force can do exactly what the Solitrack can do, where it's like, it creates this mirage of the look like a certain thing to kind of make you feel like, it's like, oh, this is enough to kind of keep you calm, because truth be told is I'm this endless entity, so I don't actually have a physical form, so I look like forms that will make you comfortable. Like for Eric, it took on the form of Trina, and for Graham, it took on the form of Grace. That's what I find most fascinating, is at no point in time did it try and do it to anyone else. But I guess because, for one, it's not like spending so much energy recreating like the house that Eric is from, but creating two fake versions of these people with all their memories and stuff like that probably takes a lot of energy and concentration, and so doing any more than that would have been hard. So I guess it was just easier just to do it for one other person, because it probably wasn't expecting like I said, doing Eric's situation is one thing, but then on top of that, Graham's situation was already pushing it even more. So doing like Yasmin and the doctor, because it's like, I mean, to be fair, the doctor, they could have brought up a lot of stuff for the doctor, so that probably would have been even more complicated. So that's probably why it didn't go down that route. But what I thought was really interesting is how, like, you can tell that the Sully track was kind of like self-conscious in certain regards, where it's like Grace is like, well, I don't know, maybe you should listen to the doctor, but then later on it's like, no, don't listen to the doctor. I guess because it's like, if it didn't play along in that regard, it would have looked even more suspicious. But even Graham, like, and it's such a heartbreaking moment of like, he's like, I want to be with Grace, because he even knows the story about the necklace, which that was a cute story of like, you and Ryan got me a necklace, a frog necklace, because I love frogs. And so I was like, oh, that's such a nice little detail. But also, like, because neither one of you, like, told each other about what you were getting me, you both ended up getting me the same thing. And so I thought that was kind of a little bit of an adorable story. But, like, even, like, Trina and Grace were kind of like, I don't know, aren't we? Like, so it didn't seem like it was a full-on trap, but I guess that's the point of a trap, to make you feel like it's not a trap, so... What I thought was really fascinating, though, it seems like it must have some level of sight effect, because it didn't work on Hannah. So I'm kind of like, is it because she's blind? Because she's blind, does that make her a little more, like, her other senses are stronger? So did it make her a little more sensitive to its ruse? Because she also talked about the fact is that she can see a little bit of light. So I wondered, did that have any effect? Because she got immediately like, you're not my mom. But Eric was so convinced, because Hannah is just as devastated about losing her mom just as Eric is, but because even Eric was like, oh honey, of course we should stay here, like I'd never let you stay somewhere dangerous, and she's like, well yeah you would, because you're sick, you're not right ever since mom died, like meaning that he's not in the right state of mind. So I thought that was interesting. But for Graham finally being able to see through is because Grace would never let me leave Ryan in a dangerous situation. So it's like, you almost had me, but you're not my Grace. I wish you were, but you're not. And it's like, oh. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And also how it handles itself, because it's like, it blasts people out. But I love the doctor being like, no, you don't want someone like Eric. You want someone like me, who's lived a very long time, who's seen so much of the universe, who's loved so much and lost so much, and which took the Sullyfield interest, and it breaks the illusion that was created, because keeping up that illusion was too much strain. But I love that it takes on the form. It's like, wait, the Sully track, I keep wanting to say Sullyfield. The Sully track is a frog that talks, that sounds like Grace. It's like, no, but spending time as Grace, it kind of started liking frogs, and Grace, I guess, was kind of associated with it, so that's the voice it shows. So I thought that was kind of pretty neat. It kind of, another comparison, Person of Interest, like The Machine. If you know Person of Interest, The Machine kind of chose its voice of a particular person just because of particular reasons. So it just kind of made me feel like that kind of a situation. But I loved the intimacy between the doctor and the Sully track, because for it's almost like the doctor had to break up with it, because it's like, this is a whole other universe that no one knows nothing about, because this universe can't coexist with ours, because things just kind of break apart. Because even the doctor is like, I will die and you will die if we stay together, which is like, I know, but the fact of the matter is we'll always be friends and stuff. It's like, kind of like I said, because it's almost like our universe had to break up with the Sullyfield, because it's like, yeah, you kind of bring me down, which is kind of terrible to say, but I mean, it kind of fits in this situation. But it's almost like a breakup, that it's like, we're just not meant to be type of situation, which is sad. Like this Sully Tracks is kind of this existence that can't, it's like, I want to be with you, I want to know you, like that universe. And it's like, I miss you all, like everything in that universe. I want to, that's why this whole thing was, it's not meant necessarily to be a trap to keep you here for maniacal reasons. It's like, no, because I love that universe, but we just can't coexist. And it's kind of this entity that's kind of left all on its own, which is kind of heartbreaking in a sense. And it's just like, oh man, that sucks. And so even the doctor's kind of like, yeah, I hope it survived. The fact of the matter is, she's like, I just, it just became friends with it. An entire universe. Which I was like, the doctor has the craziest experiences, because that's such a dope thing. It's like, yo, I'm friends with the universe. a universe that no one really knows or is communicated with, might not even know existed. Also, we learned about this because the doctor heard stories about this whole situation, and even Yasmin's like, your grandmother told you stories like this? Her fifth grandmother, who was her favorite, because apparently she's had 7. So I guess that kind of makes, because isn't the whole regeneration thing only for Time Lords? That's always been like my misconception about this. Like I learned, and because not all Gallifreyans are Time Lords, so not all Gallifreyans have the ability to do regeneration, or do they? Like, I'm pretty sure like the regeneration thing comes about you becoming a Time Lord, but all of them have the potential to do it. Can anyone do the whole regeneration thing if they went through the same process that a Time Lord went through, or is it just something like only Gallifreyan biology allows for it? I have no idea. And that's probably stuff that has been answered in the past, and I don't know. That's just kind of a tangent on its own. It's just kind of an interesting thought behind it. But it's like, I guess, like, you know, over the years, maybe like her grandfather got remarried or something like that. I don't know. I guess there's multiple ways to kind of interpret that situation. So, but yeah, it was kind of an interesting episode. I was halfway expecting us to come across some monster. I thought like, oh, this is gonna be some spooky, scary. It's like, no, but like I said, I made which, you know, once again kind of fits, like, you know, Coraline is kind of a spooky, scary thing in its own regard, because obviously the world and everything like that. But like the Solar Track didn't get to such an extent or whatever like that. So, but like I said, I was more so expecting like a monster situation. I was actually surprised when it turns out that was all kind of a lie. That was kind of a nice like red herring to make you think like, oh, this is all about some monster. But then what's that got to do with that other world? Nothing, while everything at the same time. I thought it was kind of like how those kind of tied together like that. So that's pretty interesting. But luckily, when it's all said and done, Eric is back with his daughter, because I think he read the message that the doctor had read, and it's almost like, wow, like my daughter was that scared they had to write it and make, because it's like I could have been gone forever. Because the only reason why he never came back was because he was afraid that if he left, he'd never make it back again. But it's almost like his words were like, oh, there's plenty of food in the freezer or whatever and stuff like that. But it's still kind of like, that's still a dick thing to do, because even Hannah kind of later on is like, wait, my dad left me? He lied to me saying there's a monster out there, when in actuality it's something he made just so I wouldn't leave. Like I said, that's a dick thing to do as a parent, but like at the same time, it's not justifiable, but you can understand where he's coming from, because he's going through heartbreak, just like his daughter was, but he was so like caught up in his own grief, he had blinders on, essentially. So, but it seems at the end that they will be going back home, kind of back to society and everything, Wi-Fi, friends and stuff like that. I love at the end that Hannah actually hugs Ryan, even though they didn't like each other at the beginning, or rather she didn't like him. So I thought that was pretty neat. And even the whole thing about Graham and Ryan, that was kind of a nice moment of him being like, oh, so it was Nan. And he was like, no, at first, but then he was like, yeah, it was kind of like her. He's like, well, I think about her every day, but at the very least, we still got each other, right, Granddad? And he was like, wait, what did you call me? He's like, are you getting hard of hearing in your age? I'm like, oh, that's so adorable. It's like, yeah, finally, because that's all he's been waiting for Ryan to do, is call him Granddad, but he really wouldn't. But it was kind of nice that it happened like this, because he could see how much seeing Grace again shook him up. Could barely get that out. So overall, like a great episode, and just I love how everything was executed, and just like the premise of the entire episode, and just like like it's kind of interesting knowing that like there's this other universe out there that's like, you know, kind of stuck and alone, and it's just kind of like, it's like, but you go on, keep like, if I stay here, you're going to die too, and you need to live on being the brilliant thing that you are. But it's like, we'll always be friends, even if we're apart from each other. It would have been nice if the Doctor and it could have spent more time together. So, because like I said, even the Doctor was kind of down for it. So, like I said, especially when the Doctor kind of blew this dimension a kiss as she was leaving, kind of made you go, it's almost like a breakup. But friends who won't be seeing each other for a very long time, maybe ever again. So, it's kind of a bittersweet episode in that regard. Like I said, it's also kind of funny in the grand scheme of things, but nevertheless, I'm very interested to see what the next episode has in store. And now moving on to this week's episode of Charmed. Quite a few things went down in this episode, so let's break it down bit by bit. First of all, we have the whole situation. First, Macy's kind of going back, trying to put herself out there in the dating world. Obviously, Galvin breaks up with Summer, plus he gets his funding cut by Dr. Wagner, so there's that. And he was kind of a dick to Macy. I mean, he apologized for it at first, but she was like, first of all, I don't know what kind of relationship we have, but they don't give you the right to talk to me like that. I am your boss and everything. But also, it's like, dude, if it wasn't for Macy, you wouldn't even have your job right now. Granted, he doesn't know that, but I'm still like, oh, you're just a dick, Galvin. But at the same time, it's like, you understand he's in a lot of stress and he apologized for it, so it makes it okay, but it's still kind of like that first instinct of me to go giving the middle finger like, oh, don't you disrespect Macy like that, dude. Come on, all she sacrificed for you. Come on, dude. Because I actually thought that's why she was actually working so hard, like focusing on her job so much, was because she was still trying to compensate for trying to save money so that Galvin could keep his job. I thought that was it, but I guess she's already kind of done that, already cut back on a lot of stuff in that regard, so I guess that's already being taken care of. But even Wagner was like, no, go out, live your life, enjoy it. You can wait. You know, you could eventually turn into me and become a workaholic later on in your career and stuff like that. It'll be here waiting for you. So I thought that was kind of pretty neat. Even her boss is telling her, don't be so much of a workaholic. So that's kind of interesting. But, yeah, it's like, hey, the whole Summer situation didn't work out. It's kind of sad. It makes you wonder why. I mean, I guess it's like, don't really need a reason why. Just relationship didn't work out. So there's that. But Macy, you know, is trying to put herself back out there, which also plays a part in the episode because it's all about cicadas, you know, coming up every 17 years. Is that like a thing in mythology or something? Like, why 17? Because I think a similar thing happened in, was it like the second to last season of Grimm? Maybe it might have been the last one, but I want to say it was like the second to last one, that cicada, like, Vesson would pop up every like 17 years, if I remember correctly. I think that was a whole thing, so that's what immediately makes my mind think of in that regard, but maybe I'm misremembering it wrong. But yeah, that's kind of creepy. What's also interesting too is it seems like everyone that worked at Aptitude Match was one, which obviously, you know, Macy feels so bad because it's like, oh man, Maggie feels so bad because she set all those people up. Well, she even set Macy up on the app because it's like she kept pushing her to kind of put herself out there because Macy's just not really willing to take that step forward with a lot of people. Galvin is probably the first person she's done it towards in a long time. To be fair, we don't really know too much about her relationships in the past. Galvin might be like the first one she's really had most of her life, but you know, because she always had to be like the smart and brainy one. She never felt like she was like the sexy one, even though she's a very beautiful lady, you know. So I think that's kind of nice that like Maggie represents that side of her, represents kind of being like, oh, recognize how beautiful and sexy, and like, you know, it's not, because eventually it's not just about like, you know, people wanting you, but at the end of the day, it's about you wanting somebody, and at the end of the day, it turned out like the other person she wanted was Galvin, so, because her feelings for him, because what the bond that they have is just kind of something she probably has never really clicked like that with anyone else. So, which is kind of interesting because it's like, yeah, you're kind of catching him on the rebound in a certain regard, but it's like, it's love, so why get so caught up in stuff like that? You know, the thought process of that being like, yeah, it's a weird, awkward time, but even Galvin was like, yes, after they set the date and everything, he's like, still got it, boy. So I thought that was kind of pretty cute. I actually was kind of surprised. I wasn't expecting her and Galvin to get together. I thought that was just going to be like a not going to happen thing. But hey, we'll see kind of how that works out. There's that whole situation at the end where she is, Galvin is getting hit by a car, and it's that protective spell. I guess it's kind of like the universe works in an interesting way because it's kind of like, no, it's keeping him away. Like, it's kind of like a Final Destination thing in a sense, and rather than trying to kill him, it's trying to protect him. So it's like, oh, he's on his way to his date with Macy in an attempt to keep him, you know, because he feels strongly for her, and maybe it's supposed to just be coincidence, but I highly doubt that. It's just he happens to get hit just as that was happening, or maybe there's something more to it, but that's what it immediately seems like, just because they're at a state where it's like both of their feelings are heightened towards each other, just because I think that's what also drove Galvin to kind of like jump ahead of like just kind of brushing Macy off, because he thought like, oh, you kept brushing me off, but maybe it's just something with that tattoo kind of changed his feelings that made him do that. But things between him, maybe his feelings for Macy outshine the protective bit. Like maybe it has an overarching effect like that where it like changes how Galvin like changes his mindset to be like, no, I got to get away from Macy. I can't be drawn to Macy like that. She doesn't feel like, because it did seem like he did jump to going out with Summer pretty quickly. It's like you didn't give no buffer room. I mean, I get it. She bailed out on a lot of times, but it was kind of family stuff. But maybe he felt like that. He even asked, like, was I reading the situation wrong? She's like, no, blah, blah, so I have no idea. So we'll kind of have to wait and see on that front. But also, like, I love, like, obviously, this plays into the fact is, oh yeah, Harry really, really hates insects, but everyone in this episode kind of got grossed out because the cicadas are planting eggs in people, and just like Mel and Maggie are disgusted. You even have like Harry covering up his mouth because he's going to be sick from the whole occasion. They try to spell, but it doesn't work on the Queen, and so Macy literally squashes her with like a circuit box or something like that, which is like, wow, that was pretty effective. So also shows you how strong those telekinetic muscles are. The fact that she lifted it up and squashed her like, well, the literal bug that she was. So that's interesting. Another aspect of this that I found fascinating is the whole situation with because I'm getting everyone's name wrong in my head. I'm sorry. Mel. And the fact is that we ended up finding out who this girl is. Her name is Jada. She is half witch, half white lighter. I was like, yo! Is that, like, that's so interesting. I mean, I would have never thought that she was that. It never would have crossed my mind. But to be fair, it's like, she is technically teleporting away, and her situation is a little bit different. But it's like, yo, that's dope. It makes you wonder, like, the group she's a part of, Sarkana, is that... like, it's probably, like, it's anyone witches that don't fit the Elders group, essentially. So I'm sure there are she might be the only half witch, half white lighter, but maybe there's other witches in there who are mixed with other things. Maybe someone that's half demon or half something else, or just witches in general who just don't follow what the Elders believe in and stuff like that. So it's kind of a fascinating thing. But going back to it, it's like, that's so interesting. I wonder, like, I guess the electricity is just naturally her power, or maybe each white lighter is kind of different. Maybe it comes down to the witches and stuff like that, because it's like, just because your parents have a certain ability doesn't mean it transfers necessarily to you, because Marisol had premonitions and none of the sisters has it. But it's so interesting to me because it's like, while we have a half white lighter, half witch who isn't one of the charmed ones. To be fair though, Macy does seem like she is something else with the whole darkness. So we don't know if she's half something else too, or whether that's just part of, like, she's a full-blown witch, but there's something more to that witchness, that something happened to Marisol at that time to maybe corrupt the baby in some shape or form, to corrupt Macy in some shape or form. Kind of have to wait on that front, but it's just so interesting. But that's pretty dope. But she wants Mel for a member of the Sarkana, because for them the Sarkana is like, we're all about using our powers to help everyone, because the Elders put, kind of like in this episode, Charity kind of sets up to be like, no, we don't interfere with human relations. Like, things that are human crimes, we leave that to the humans to deal with. We use our powers to help the world in regard of, like, fighting supernatural demons and stuff like that. So for them, it's like, we deal with the worldwide issue of supernatural stuff, where we leave the humans to deal with the day-to-day human problems. So, but Mel obviously kind of doesn't 100% agree with that, because it's like, oh, we could do so much with our magic, but at the same time, I guess the argument could be made that it throws everything off balance. There's a natural order to the world that they're trying to keep, and if they use their powers like that, then there'll be issues. Like, it seems Charity and Harry had their experience with the Sarkana, and that is Fiona. She was Charity's sister, younger sister, and she apparently, like, that whole situation is Sarkana is the one who ended up convincing her to use her magic, and she ended up getting found out, and she ultimately killed herself. That whole circumstances that she found herself in was because of Sarkana, and so that's why they're trying to warn her against them. Harry also says that's the reason why they broke up, is because both of them felt so guilty because they were so caught up in their relationship. Once again, Harry had talked about it because he wasn't vigilant enough at the time, like, that happened, and so he blames himself. Him and Charity blamed themselves for being so caught up in their love that they didn't see the signs of, like, something was wrong with Fiona. So, but granted, later on we hear, like, no, she almost saw Fiona. That's what I was kind of guessing. I was like, Fiona's the one they pulled out. So most likely what it is, because the way Charity was acting, she's like, because of Fiona, and she's like, yeah, sure, eyes dart away. Fiona's not dead. She never killed herself. Harry probably believes that because that's probably what Charity told him. Like, Charity and probably the other elders banished her into Tartarus, which, to be fair, is kind of interesting. Which also is kind of interesting because it's like, apparently, she's like a very, very powerful witch. It might even be a situation that Fiona might have been like an elder, but Charity kind of took her place. So it might be a situation of like, we have sibling situations going on here, which we don't know. This could, interestingly enough, be a precursor for the Charmed ones. It never came up in the original Charms, but it could be something we see in this, where we see some of the sisters kind of turn against each other to a certain degree of just kind of a difference of opinion how things should work. Like Mel is going undercover to expose the Sarkana, learn all about them, but there might be a chance that she might get swayed, and it kind of puts her at odds with Maggie and Macy. So I could potentially see that going on, but we'll see in the long run. So I am curious to see, like, if, like, that whole story that Harry told, like, the thing is, does he know the truth, or is he under the same impression as everyone else? Like, her getting locked up like that, maybe that wasn't just anyone who did that, like, not even just someone she trusted. Maybe it was Charity doing that to punish her for doing that. I mean, to be fair, you know, she was locked up and everything, right? Well, truth be told, she was locked up in Tartarus, so it's not completely a lie. So it's hard to say, because to be fair, like, Harry might be taking all of this from Charity's perspective, so he might not actually know the truth, is what I was trying to say earlier, but maybe he does. I kind of feel like he doesn't. Like, his reaction did seem generous, but I don't know. Like, Charity's situation, she just seemed a little... That's why I kind of made it was like, Fiona is still alive and she's the one. So I kind of figured as much. So that's definitely going to be interesting. Especially because it's like, oh yeah, someone from the Sarkana had to have killed Marisol. But the thing is, like, Marisol apparently supported them. That's what Jada said. Maybe Marisol and Fiona go back. Maybe that's what that's about. Or maybe she just supported the group in general. For her, it's like, she probably didn't always like the way the elders handle things herself, even though she was an elder herself, because it's like, there are probably some times where the elders are very sticklers for rules. Hence, like Jada's whole situation, because she's an abomination, being half angel, half white light or half witch. So, which is interesting, like, whatever Macy's situation is going on, they don't think of her as an abomination. So that's why I'm kind of like, she's got to be fully witch and nothing else for them not to feel the need. I mean, to be fair, maybe her circumstances are a little bit different because she is one of the Charmed ones. So, but I'm very interested to kind of learn more about this Arcana. Obviously, they're trying to keep Fiona's presence unaware to her because obviously they busted her out of Tartarus and everything. It's interesting because Mel says she destroyed the other piece, but I wonder, is that true? I would assume, like, as powerful as it is, considering the fact is they kept the pieces, made me think it wasn't possible to destroy it. Maybe Mel lied about that, but maybe she was truthful about it. So it's like there's no chance of getting anyone else out of Tartarus. So, and that also corrects me on something too I brought up last episode. I was like, oh, do you think there's some chance of like Macy and Harry? It's like, no, there's no chance of that now, because it's like I'd completely forgot about the whole Charity angle of like, all right, there was something between them. Plus, as we can see, Macy and the whole Galvin situation. So that kind of takes that out of my head. But it does seem like they might be hinting towards the whole Jada and Mel situation. I mean, to be fair, that was kind of hinted at before when she like kind of flirted with Mel super hard when they first met last episode. So there's that angle. But maybe I don't know. It might put her in a situation to be what I thought, where it's like, no, maybe she'll be the Phoebe in the situation, dating, well, not a demon, but someone who's considered kind of the bad guy who can be persuaded to go down a different route. I mean, in their eyes, they are the good guys, because it's like, we're willing to do what the elders aren't, and that's use our powers for good rather than just this mission that they determine when and where we can use our powers to help people, you know? Maybe things aren't as cut as dry, because things have gotten bad in the past. Might not just be the Fiona situation, because they have talked about like other people being killed by them. So we'll see, because there's also the angle of like, did they have something to do with Marisol's death? It was electricity that killed her. Obviously couldn't have been Fiona because she was locked up. It doesn't seem like it's Jada. She kind of says like Marisol was an ally, so why would it kill her? So we'll see on that front. And then the other side of things is the whole Maggie and Parker situation, which is interesting. As I kind of figured as much, his demon side is hurting him. Like the whole medications he's taking is to kind of keep his demon side from killing his human side. It's only a band-aid, as his dad says. But what's interesting is like his dad's like, oh, you're getting worse. Well, suck it up and get to it, because he's saying the serum that he's trying to make, we don't know what it is exactly, but that serum will help us, cure you. But obviously that's kind of a more, oh, it happens to do that, but at the same time, it's like he has other purposes for it. Which now I'm sitting here thinking about it, it's like, right, Maggie is potentially the Phoebe in this situation. Both of them kind of dating someone that they probably, potentially, like I said, that depends on if they do the whole Mel and Jada thing or not. I mean, it might be part of her cover, but it might also just be the fact is I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of into her. Depends on how they handle that situation. So, but nevertheless, what really actually shocked me was Hunter's concern. He's like, all right, he gets it, Dad. Don't need to stick the knife in deeper. And it's like, oh, he's like, because he's got his bros back. And I love that he showed up as like the waitress lady at the restaurant that him and Maggie were at. And he's kind of like, ooh, there you go, sexy Parker or whatever. And I was like, what the? His brother. And it's like, yeah. And his brother's like, yeah, we can't care, because Parker's like, no, I don't care about her. It's just all part of the plan. And he's like, yeah, good, because we don't care. That's a human thing. He's like, I mean, sorry, but I mean, I get it. You're half human. But he's like, nah, you're a full demon at heart, which is like, once again, it's kind of, he even said himself, it's like, I always got your back, bro, which is kind of sweet in a weird, messed up way. Because it's like, yeah, I think it's an interesting family dynamic of like, yeah, both of them have issues with their dad, but ultimately for him, it's like, yeah, you're my brother through and through. You might be half human, but he doesn't look at Parker with like distaste like your dad kind of does. So I think that's kind of interesting. Also, the fact is that they got two different abilities. Once again, it's just, I find it interesting, like hereditary wise. I mean, to be fair, we don't know what their dad's ability is, but Hunter can shapeshift into people, and Parker can go all shadowy and phase through people and things. So obviously, he manipulates Maggie into giving blood and plasma, also convincing Mel to do it. So they got double the charmed ones, blood and plasma, to kind of do what they need to with. So it's definitely going to be interesting going forward with that, because everything is kind of going into the way they want it to. Because initially, Maggie was going to go away to Chicago for this internship connected to this aptitude match, until she found out, like, oh yeah, it's a whole bunch of cicadas on working this whole situation. So it's like, nope. But it was also that sweet thing of Maggie being like, Macy being like, oh, I was hoping we'd spend the summer together. It'd be like our first summer together, like as sisters and stuff like that, because obviously you won't be in school and stuff like that. I'm like, that's so sweet, because you want to spend some sisterly bonding time, because like the only time they get, it's like when it's charmed related stuff, and the time in between, like her being in classes or Macy working at the lab. So it's like they would have more time to spend together, which even Maggie says at the end, it's like, yeah, I want that, because it's like, with all the danger we're in, demons coming at us at any point in time, like the fact of the matter is, I want to spend as much time together. I'm like, yay, family bonding is so cute, it's adorable, it's amazing, yay! So, like I said, a lot of interesting things got revealed in this episode and went down. I'm very interested to see what goes down in the next episode. From what I was seeing, because I've been kind of pretty lax about this, but apparently next week is the mid-season finale, so I'm very interested. I caught glimpses of it, which I wish I didn't, because it kind of spoiled certain things, but nevertheless, I won't talk about it, but I'm very interested to see what goes down in the mid-season finale, what they've got in store for us. Obviously, it's probably going to be a pretty, like, oh my god, ending to it, just because mid-season finale and all that, but we'll have to wait and see. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and good